Survival horror has become a game genre all its own and is beloved by many gamers. In the spirit of Halloween, let's take a look back at survival horror and why it means so much to us. Hey guys, it's me, Jake Baldino, and I'm here wearing probably the worst Tony Stark costume you've ever seen. Happy Halloween. Survival horror, which is listed on Wikipedia and many other websites as a subgenre of horror, which I personally don't think is true. In a lot of ways, survival horror has merged with regular horror, but in a lot of other ways, they remain completely separate. You may not know it, but survival horror started way back when with Sweet Home in 1989 on the PC. This was a Capcom-developed game based on the Japanese horror movie of the same name, and in a lot of ways was a precursor to Resident Evil. It was a top-down, character-driven, spooky game with limited resources and spooky monsters to fight. After that, in 1992, we saw Alone in the Dark based off of the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. This was very traditional and very spooky, walking around a spooky haunted house solving puzzles, but it kind of paved a way for games afterwards. In a lot of ways, the first Alone in the Dark is classic survival horror gameplay distilled to its core. And then after that, we got from Capcom in 1996, Resident Evil. Boom, the one that really kind of, in a lot of ways, started it all. Surprisingly enough, borrowing a lot of things from the 1989 Sweet Home game. Door opening, loading screens, and the inventory management that we've all grown to love so much. Resident Evil was fantastic and of course one of my favorite games of all time, and it really paved the way for other titles like Silent Hill and Eternal Darkness, which kind of expanded on the formula. In the age of PlayStation 2, we saw games like the Clock Tower sequels and Fatal Frame really take things to the next creepy, just over-the-top level. These games really took survival horror to places you wouldn't expect with really mature, creepy themes. The one exception, of course, is Resident Evil 4, which in a lot of ways was very much survival horror, limited ammo, very scary, tight resources, stuff like that, but really took it to the next level with a lot of action sequences and a lot of shootouts, and I feel like towards the end of the game, some of that tension was lost. Despite that, Resident Evil 4 is a fucking blast, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. But I digress. And then after that, if you guys think about it, once the PS3 and 360 rolled around, we kind of saw a bit of a lull. Yeah, there were some titles out there, but nothing absolutely huge. We had no Resident Evils. We had Amy, which was basically a return to Resident Evil tank control style survival horror, which was absolutely downright awful, and we saw a reboot remake of Alone in the Dark that was equally pretty damn terrible. The new Alone in the Dark's mistake was that it went way too far into action cinematic territory. While this time was a lull for survival horror, we did see Dead Space. Dead Space was kind of the savior that brought back low resources, tight corridors, claustrophobic feeling, enemies that kill you in one shot, and an absolute ongoing sense of dread. The Dead Space games were hella successful and really kind of brought things back, gave me hope in survival horror. After that, in recent years, thanks to PewDiePie and stuff like that, we've seen a rise in popularity of indie horror PC games, most notably Amnesia and Slender. These games really did it for a lot of people, and they were very scary. In a lot of ways, they succeeded in scaring you by what you don't see. While not all of these were necessarily survival horror, a lot of them did focus on solving puzzles and using tight resources, so that counts for me. These indie horror PC games were a bit of a revolution for survival horror because they were first person. And that was something that players of Resident Evil weren't exactly used to, but they did feel at home with that inventory management and just the general sense of anxiety that these games bring. So now here we are on Halloween at the end of 2014, and I like to think the point I was trying to make was that these survival horror games have grown into something else. The absolute fervor of the indie horror PC scene has really grown into survival horror and made it a new thing, and now we get to see it with games like The Evil Within and Alien Isolation. I think they're both perfect examples of where things are going for survival horror games. On the one hand, you have Alien Isolation, which is a full AAA title based on a movie, which is using gameplay mechanics from indie horror PC games like Amnesia and stuff like that. Games where you run around in first person and you are terrified and you hide from things more so than fight them. And then on the other hand, we have Shinji Mikami's Evil Within, which is kind of a return to form with little bits of Resident Evil 4 and little bits of action games, but at the end of the day, it really is a survival horror game with a lot of scary moments. Both of these games succeed in scaring the absolute shit out of the player in many ways, and I really hope that their success leads to us seeing more games like this. I truly think that with these games, while Alien Isolation isn't perfect, it has its moments. I think that this is the new age of survival horror, and I hope we see games that are a bit of a return to form and a bit of a push forward, how Evil Within embraces Resident Evil 4 while being very Resident Evil 1, and then Alien Isolation being a horror game that embraces the indie PC scene. And I think we're all very fortunate to be playing these games right now because I'm having a blast, thanks to Resident Evil, thanks to Sweet Home, thanks to Alone in the Dark. So really, this video is kind of a conversation starter with us for you guys. Let us know in the comments what your favorite survival horror games are. But most importantly, let us know why you like survival horror games. What do they make you feel, and what are your favorite ones? Is it fighting zombies off with 2 bullets? Is it walking down a dark hallway where you don't know what's going to happen next? Let us know in the comments below. As always, liking this video really helps us out. We really appreciate it, and it's Halloween, so definitely click that spooky like button. I'm sorry, that's so stupid. I'm so stupid. Anyway, you should definitely subscribe because I'm dressed up like freaking Iron Man, and if you've subscribed already, we love you guys so much, and we'll see you next time. Beep!